to another episode of Barbershop Therapy, where we cut through the problems. I'm Jimmy Evans, your host, and I'm here with two special guests today, and we're having a conversation about being a father to younger and older males. And I'm here with Mr. Ryan and Mr. Keith. Mr. Keith, could you tell me something about yourself?
Sure. Keith Lipscomb, grew up in Martinsville, Virginia, father of two teenagers. Got a 19-year-old son and a 16-year-old daughter.
Okay. What do you do for them?
Actually work in banking. Been a business analyst, a business process analyst for about 20 years. So.
All right.
Going
Need a
strong.
loan later on. We'll talk about that. Married, single, divorced, separated?
Separated.
All right.
But all good.
Brings its own set of challenges.
It does, but probably closer now than we were when we were married,
Okay.
which is crazy, but it works.
Okay. Well, and you are again Mr. Keith Lipscomb.
Lipscomb, yeah.
All right. And now, Mr. Ryan,
Yes, sir.
tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right, so Ryan White from New Bern, North Carolina. So I'm like a country boy like Keith. Got some country values, trying to instill them into, I got a 17-year-old and a 26-year-old. Good gosh.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, but yeah, I mean, we got history. Jimmy used to cut both my boys' hairs, and so I'm looking forward to the conversation because, Jimmy done seen us go through some things, and so, I've learned a lot from him. So, looking forward to the conversation.
Well, good, man. Listen, I'm glad that both of you are here because, like I said, we all have history together. We all have kids around the same age, and we went through several of the same challenges, right? So, I really want to just talk about, what that looks like and why we're going through these challenges with our boys, trying to raise them. Keith, you've been with me, what,
Oh, wow.
12 years maybe?
At least, yeah.
At least.
At
Ryan?
12.
What,
Shoot.
18?
18.
18?
Yeah,
19
18,
years?
19. Yeah.
Wow. So I've seen your young men grow up to, be great young men without challenges,
Right.
and I have a 19-year-old right now that, y'all listen to my same experiences. And so just to kind of open this up a little bit, Ryan, if you don't mind sharing a little bit about some of the things the challenges that you might be going through with your oldest and your youngest.
Well, I think part of the challenge, getting to the root of it is they're different, and not different in a bad way. As we were raised different. Each generation is different, and I think one of the things I've learned is that growing up in Eastern North Carolina, having parents who grew up in segregated schools, you raise your boys based off of that. They're growing up in Raleigh. Raleigh's more diverse. It's relatively speaking, from where we grew up, it's the big city.
Right.
There's less accountability. In New Bern, we cross the street. Boop, 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 boop. I saw Ryan across the street, right? So there was the village was a lot bigger.
Right. You have
And
a community there.
Right. So we were accountable to a lot more people as kids. And so there was a consistent message from everybody, even folks who, that you knew, I may not be doing all the right stuff.
That's right.
They grew up with your parents. They wanted you to do the right thing, so they would check you too. So there was no misstepping. Our parents grew up with the teachers we had.
You have multi-layers of
Right.
communication.
Absolutely.
Different people that could get back to your parents what you were doing in the day.
Absolutely. So here, bigger city, smaller village, and that's the irony of it. And so there's less voices that are consistent with yours.
That's right.
Because Raleigh is so diverse, not everybody's growing up with the same values that we grew up. Because New Bern is a small town, and both of my parents had 9 brothers and sisters, so
Wow.
we had a big family.
So let's talk about that part of it, right?
Okay.
Being raised differently. What are you doing differently than you feel like your parents did raising you?
So I talk more. My parents weren't talkers; they talked at us, and we executed. That's kind of how this thing was. And so, in retrospect, I do wish my parents talked more. But what I'm finding is I'm doing a lot more talking, but not necessarily giving them the space to talk too.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I do give them the space to talk, because of how we were raised, being honest as a kid can sometimes come across as disrespectful.
Talking back.
Absolutely.
So now you're being rude.
Yep. That's right.
So then it's
So-
over talking them. So there's that weird space of trying to give them the freedom to communicate that I wish I had, but then them not knowing how to navigate what respect looks like and what doesn't, which the teenagers.
Okay, so
Can they
does
can they navigate that?
I think it absolutely can be navigated for this reason. That's a learned skill set.
Absolutely.
We never learned it, so we're in the
Right.
process of teaching something that we've never learned.
Right.
You know, as far as where our parents were taught, they were teaching us how to survive, and they were
Right.
teaching us how to surviving. You know,
Right.
we got to
That's
realize
true.
we 3 generations out of slavery, 4 generations out of slavery, maybe.
Yeah.
Right.
So, you know, you can really reach back and talk to your great grandparents when we were kids, because they were. I got a grandfather right now that's 90 years old, and
Oh, wow.
you know, I lost my great grandfather when he was 93. So I had an opportunity to kind of see and hear their perspective of how they were raised, and you know, seeing the first TV, seeing
You remember that?
that conversation with them. You know
Yeah,
what I'm saying?
absolutely,
And
yeah.
so, you know, but you hear some of the fear they had when it came to encountering, you know, people that belittled them.
Right.
You know, our counterparts, you know, Caucasian counterparts at that time that were in Jim Crow and you know, slavery prior to that. So they were teaching us their version of respect. I think,
Right.
you
Right.
know, was not to get hung, not to get
Right.
killed,
Make it home.
make it home, not to be Emmett Till.
Right.
You know, and so what that looked like to that next generation was, hey, be respectful, hold your head down, no, be seen, not heard. Don't bring too much attention to yourself. And you know, as fathers, it is something difficult to see your dad basically told by somebody of a different color that he has to do this and he had to do it to survive,
Right.
right? So now when we're talking to our kids and everything, trying to figure out how do we teach them to communicate on a level that we were never taught to communicate on.
Right.
You know, that's a struggle. I don't know about you, but Keith, have you had an experience trying to figure that out as well?
I mean, it's, you know, like you said, we all sharing the same thing. Because growing up, kind of like Ryan, I mean, I grew up, you know, having family, being the youngest of 6, but my mom had 16 siblings. Now, my dad only had 2. So, you know, it was balanced out. But having such a large family, I mean, and my mom was old. My mom was like 40. My mom turned 40 when I was born. I was born in February. She turned 40 in March.
She was tired.
Exactly, but you know, I had 5 siblings, you know, before me. So,
That's right. That's right.
you know, growing up, you see all the mistakes they made. You see what not to do. So by the time it get to me, you already know that ain't gonna work.
Yeah.
You know, no matter what you're trying, it ain't gonna work. And then too, having a community. You know, I went to high school. My high school literally was right across the street from my house.
Oh yeah.
It wasn't skipping school.
Yeah. None of
You
that.
know, you skip school, everybody in the neighborhood know you skip school. You can't go nowhere if you
As
skip.
soon as you get home, she waiting at the door for you.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Right.
you know, growing up in that kind of environment, you know, like Ryan was saying, you had people that could police you. You can't police other people's kids now.
Right.
In a sense, because if you say something to, you know, one of your, now, if it's your friend, your kid's close friends, but you just see, you know, somebody you know from the neighborhood acting out, you can't correct them, because if you do, now you might have to fight.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And that's bad. Where when we got corrected, it was like, oh, thank you. You might get a spanking from
Right,
the
right.
neighbor, and then you're going to get another one by the time you get home. By the time you make that walk
Absolutely.
home, you're going to get it again. That don't happen these days. So, you know, going back to communicating, same thing. You're talking to kids and trying to instill the same values that we learn. You know, being respectful. You know, respect your elders. Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, things like that. But then when they start getting up, they're communicating and you know, corralling around people that may not have the same values. You know, our kids played football together, so we had a community
Right.
with Cap City. You know, we had dads that was there, and you know, Ryan could tell Kyle and the other boys, hey man, y'all chill out, and they knew that was it. Once he got to high school, man, it changed. Now you were a whole different group of people. You got all these kids come from different neighborhoods, and then he started learning little stuff from, kids in the neighborhood, or kids from other neighborhoods that we didn't tolerate, but you learning at school and you getting away with at school because they telling the teachers what to do.
Okay, so now I got a question for the both of you, or not more of a what does a young male's voice look like now, or sound like? What should it sound like to you?
Wow. So for us, one of the things we tried to do was teach both our boys to advocate for themselves, and that can be a slippery slope. I'll say that because you want them to, when you see wrong, speak on it. If you're in school and you get a grade on a report on a paper or something, respectfully. But again, the freedom to advocate for yourself needs to be tempered with maturity. And when you think about how our boys mature, what does that look like? But then when you also think about the cultural influences in regards to, and this might be a slippery slope I'm going down, but what is, the better question might be, what does black male masculinity look like?
Okay.
Because that's a challenge in itself. Because the louder, the bigger image is rah rah rah. I'm loud, I'm boisterous, I'm flashy. That's not the world most of us live in.
No, but that is what's presented to most mass media,
Right.
radio,
Yeah, I was
music
ready to go
industry.
there. Yep.
So I do agree with you wholeheartedly, but I do want to get to the heart of how do our boys find that voice when, as parents, we've told them on multiple occasions, know how to talk to me, but I've never taught you how to talk to me.
Dude, listen, literally, just before I came here, I had Ryan outside talking to him for about an hour, because, and then I'm gonna say what you just said. He don't like, dude. I'm trying to teach him to read the room, and I was like, dude, you set the tone. Believe it or not, you're the thermostat.
Right.
How we respond to you is based off of the energy you give us. Now, as parents, because he's about to graduate, and what I was explaining to him is there's a lot of emotion that we're dealing with as parents watching you transition to this phase, and the concern about right decisions. What's he going to do with this? Is he going to school? What's he want to do? Every decision has to be right, but then also, our youngest is leaving now. And so that phase of parenting is leaving. So there's a lot of emotion in every conversation that we have with them. And is it your burden to know that? I'm bringing it to your attention so that when you do speak to us and we may come across as excited or agitated or what you may perceive as angry because of something you did, that's love and passion because our son's transitioning. So just be mindful because you snap back, then now we're feeding off of your energy.
It's a reaction.
Right, and so I think part of it with what I'm trying to do as a dad is say, okay, yeah, we don't always respond back the right way. And part of these conversations that we have, I'm learning. So I'm learning to modify myself, without taking a deep dive. I had to call Keith a couple weeks ago because it was about to get crazy up in there. And
well, before you step into that crazy moment, you're finding an accountability partner. You're finding people that have shared the same experiences with you. So, there may be something that Keith has done with his son that can level you off before you
that's
you dive in with yours.
That's exactly what happened. And and not to over talk, but based off of some of the engagements we had when I felt something rising up in me because he was being disrespectful, I was like, yo, you need to take a walk. I went outside and I picked up the phone and called Keith, because what I'm learning too is part of our job is to teach them how to handle conflict.
That's right.
And I'm just preaching what y'all taught me, so this ain't me saying something profound. And so I've constantly got to check myself to make sure what lesson am I teaching him when me and him bump heads. Because if I go to 100 and he goes to 110 and I go to 150,
Somebody
What-
going to jail.
right? Exactly. Now that's exactly or I'm gonna be patching up some walls later.
Yeah.
So part of it is me as a dad learning how to de-escalate and turn the knob down.
That's so important for these reasons, right? We always that toxic masculinity, right? That runs in the household. You're not gonna run my house. Not
Preach.
gonna run.
Preach.
Or are you smarter than a fifth grader? You know,
Yeah.
you're gonna allow your son to take you to that. We've all had our boys take us to that moment, and it's like, oh my God, I just grabbed my kid. You know, like he was somebody I didn't know. In that moment, it feels like the right thing to do. But once you sit back on it and think on it for a few minutes, and I took a walk when the incident with my son happened, and it broke me down. You know, I never want to lay my hands on my child ever in life in that manner, like I didn't know him.
Right.
You know, and when
Some dude off the street or something.
hey
like
man,
that.
when that happens to you with your kid, it takes you weeks to first muster up enough courage to tell your kid that you were wrong.
Right.
Secondly, you got to forgive yourself because we human, right?
Absolutely.
And you'll walk around and you'll carry that burden for a while until it starts eating at you, and you don't know how to respond to your own kid. Y'all walk around like y'all zombies in the house and can't really have that level of communication that you want it from your parents, so you don't know how to give to your kids.
Right.
Right. You know what I'm saying?
That's
So
what we're talking
at the end of the day, being able to take that hat off as the lion in the house and be able to drop your guard and be a human being to your kid versus the disciplinarian. We haven't mastered that yet. Like I was listening to this audio book called what is it? I think it was Jason Wilson, Cry Like a Man.
Man, you sent that
Yeah,
to it. I still haven't had a
yeah,
chance
yeah.
to crack it open.
Oh man, he opens up so many doors that we try to shut down in us because we have to be the protector of the house. We have to be the breadwinner of the house. We have to be the disciplinarian of the house. But there are moments as being a father that you have to realize there are vulnerable spaces that you got to go into. And you have to be able to talk to your kid about these, or he's going to repeat the same cycles that we're repeating right
Yeah.
now
Right.
when he becomes a father.
Well, it's funny you say that, and I mean, obviously, you witnessed my incident. I mean, here, and it was one of the things that you had told me before in here that I think your dad had told you about. You know, we're always telling them they've never been our age, but your dad told you we ain't never raised 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds before.
That's right.
And that was like really profound to think about because it's like, something, here we are teaching the values that we were taught. But, they don't come with no book. This is on the job training that we get. And, you dealing with incidents as they come up. And to your point, it was that calm down moment because I got a bad temper and I literally try to stay even keel every day of my life because I just know how that is. And it took some time for that to go down. I mean, obviously, I had to call you and apologize to you for even doing that here, and that was a moment for me, that was self-reflection, to have to, first of all, let me apologize for my actions or whatever, apologize to him. And then we had a conversation, after the fact, had to let him get over his, and, me and you talked or whatever. So it was me kind of, after you had talked to him while he was getting his hair cut,
Right.
kind of figuring out where his head and mind space was. And then we having a conversation, and that helped. But like you said, one of the things I've had to try to tell Kyle is that it's okay to show emotion, because you see your father, whatever, strong, they don't never show no emotion, and then you trying to be so hardcore, and then you got a lot of stuff built up inside of you. And I've had to tell him, man, don't be like me. Don't try to mask that hurt by trying to be
Right.
so tough. If you hurt, show you hurt.
And be willing to find an outlet,
Exactly.
and sometimes and we can attest to this. This is Kyle's outlet.
Yeah,
To sit in the barbershop and talk
and it
to
definitely was.
somebody that's not dad, because I'm going to say the exact same thing to your son that you say to him, but he's going to hear me
Absolutely.
because I'm not the disciplinarian in that moment. I'm just a reasonable voice.
And that helped. It helps a lot. I mean, and that's the thing that, like, going back to, like we said, about being able to discipline kids in the neighborhood or friends or whatever.
Right.
They, you know, depending on what background, they don't want to hear it, whatever, but let them know, man, it ain't always about balling your fists up and being ready to fight. Sometimes, man, you just gotta take a deep breath and exhale. And sometimes you do feel vulnerable. I mean, there's times, you know, now when things happen, you know, really having to sit back and think and be like, okay. And then when you really start thinking about it, you have that solemn moment, like, it ain't no reason for me to be yelling and screaming. You know, let's just talk this out. Ain't no use in getting upset. But, you know, you have to get to that point. I mean, and it took the incident for me to get to that point. And like I said, I try to tell him, man, you ain't got to be hard. You know, you ain't got to put on no show. You ain't got to be hardcore, you know. And everybody out that you see trying to be hardcore, there's a little boy inside of them that's screaming to get out. And and if you have somebody you can talk to, sometimes it's talking to friends, sometimes it's talking to somebody like yourself, being a neutral party or older person. Sometimes, and what we hate to do as blacks and, you know, African Americans is therapy.
I knew he was going there. I guess you gotta sit in that chair sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes you have to, but we don't do that because we were never taught that by our parents. I mean, coming up, and I'm sure all of us from little small towns, man, you going to talk to a therapist, you crazy.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's not the case.
It's such a stigma behind
Absolutely.
it that, you know, we're afraid what somebody else is going to think
No, absolutely.
versus getting the assistance. And then, and a lot of times it's not even medication or the therapy, just the tools from the therapist
That's
to
it,
cope
right
with
there.
stuff, right? So just kind of shifting gears just a little bit. Do the two of you think, but looking at our kids and all of the incidents happening around our area, school shootings, mass, you know, fights, football games, does this contribute? Because they don't have that conflict resolution. They don't have that ability to communicate at home first. So they can't take it out into the streets. So when they get into the streets, it's automatically all of that coming out at one time. And now we got kids in drive-bys, you know, kids getting ran over by other kids in high school parking lots, and, you know, fights and stuff occurring just at a football game because we're not putting our vulnerabilities out for our boys to see, and moving into a whole nother direction for our significant others to not use against us when we are vulnerable in front of them.
Well, you know, I think definitely society has gotten that to the kids. I mean, you know, now it's any little confrontation, you disrespecting me, and
Right.
and
Stepping on the shoe.
right. And I was going to say, I don't want to minimize their feelings, but stepping on somebody's shoe, disrespecting me, I mean, come on, man. I mean, so going back to what you said, conflict resolution, like, they don't know, man, that's not disrespectful. That was an accident. You mean to step on your shoe? Like, do you think I walk out the house meaning to step on
Right.
somebody's toe when I leave? Like,
That's
that
right.
ain't what it's about. But they don't know how to communicate to say, oh, my bad, man.
Yeah.
And even if you say my bad, you know,
he can't accept it.
yeah.
Right.
And then he's gonna be like, oh, you trying to punk me now or something. So it's like, come on, man. And then that little incident turns into, to your point, a shooting
Right.
and a killing. And they don't realize that you take a life, you took your own life, because now you done ruined two families
Right.
or more. You know, you
How
done
many
ruined your
people were
family.
affected?
Exactly. Your mom and dad got to suffer because you going to jail for killing somebody. The person you kill, their parents going to be, you know, they hurt because they lost a child. So everybody loses in it. There is no win in the end on that.
That's right.
You
That's
know,
exactly.
and all that quote unquote masculinity you trying to show that you hardcore. And the funny thing is that, and I'm sure we've all seen it, how many times we seen the hardcore watching 48 Hours or something where they so hardcore, when they get in that room with that bright light,
Boy,
They-
break down like a dog.
I'm trying to tell you that all of a sudden, you know, they all tensed up and
that,
crying.
that kid come out.
Yeah,
Yeah, nah,
that's exactly
absolutely.
what I'm talking about. Because now you ain't got nowhere to go.
Yeah.
You can't run.
Say,
So,
looking
yeah,
for
I mean-
that judge, boy,
Yeah.
that's a
Hey, man.
vulnerable
Man,
space. I'm telling you.
That is, man.
Yeah.
And because, and the both of you have heard me ask your kids this question, right? Tell me one thing that your father has told you to do that's been detrimental to your lifestyle.
They can't.
No.
No.
That's it.
They'll stop and they'll think.
Mhm.
And I'll ask them simple questions. Has he ever told you to go out and play in traffic? Well, no. Has he ever told you to find a tall building and jump off of it? Well, no. Has he ever told you to get in the car and you don't know how to drive and run into a building? Well, no, Mr. Jimmy, where is this going? I said, nothing that your father has ever told you has been detrimental to you. So why is it so hard for you to listen to the good information that he's giving?
That's it.
They can't answer. And you get them crickets for a minute. But that's the reasonable voice behind everything that y'all are saying to your kids.
Oh, yeah.
And we all, I think, especially as black men, we've always been shown as such a negative entity in everything. We're not in our households. We're absent fathers, even in co-parenting. We're criminals. We're thugs. We're athletes. We're predators. All of the beasts on the basketball court. We're always portrayed as something that's in a negative light.
That's true.
And so, here with Barbershop Therapy, for me, I'm trying to re-engage us as fathers to lead our men into being leaders of their households, but giving them different tools than we were given.
No, I agree. And I think also it's being leaders in the community. And so I think part of the challenge is, again, going back to what's the popular image of black males. Because truth be told, what they see on TV, if I carry that out into the streets, into the office place, I'm deliberately dialed back at work.
Absolutely. You got to be.
Because, I don't feel like I can have a bad day.
No, yeah, you gotta be on
because
top
I'm
of your game
because
all
I'm
the
afraid
time.
of how they're going to respond. So I have to dial it back. I almost liken it to, nothing against Wayne Brady. I almost have to Wayne Brady in the office so people can feel comfortable. Like a friend of mine told me one day, and he was a big dude, played basketball, about 260, about 6'3", and somebody told him when he was a high school kid, was like, as a black man, you're not gonna live long making other people feel uncomfortable and unsafe.
Exactly.
And I'm like, doggone it, that's, and so, Ryan,
What did that do to his psyche though at that time?
right, what does it do to mine? But what does it do when we start raising our boys and they start hitting puberty and they start getting tall and they're in high school and they're teachers and how they respond, and you're teaching them to advocate for themselves. They got a little bass in their voice. They got locks.
Now he's
Yeah.
getting enlarged by
Right.
the kid.
And it's
That's
like,
it.
wow. So now I'm teaching him, I'm telling you to advocate for yourself, but you need to dial it back. What does that mean? Like, how do you
Know how to advocate for yourself. So that comes in the house, right?
Right.
When we got a conflict now, or we have a disagreement, he's younger. He's coming into his own maturity, his own thought patterns, and they're not going to align with us as parents all the time.
Right.
So that's a part of us, understanding it don't have to be do as I say right now. More like, hey, let's have a conversation so you understand why, the when, the where, the causes behind what I'm telling you to do. Because that, honestly, do what I say happens. If I tell you don't walk out in traffic, I'm gonna snatch it back.
Right.
But if I tell you, hey, you probably don't want to wear that shirt that says, NWA on it to school today. Well, why, Dad? Well, here are the negative things that are going to be said if they read the rest of that shirt. And we got to start giving our kids more of the why and more skills than just my dad tough on me. I'm scared of my dad. I live by that healthy fear of your parents pretty much all my life. My dad was 6'3", turned wrenches all his life.
country strong and that mechanic strength?
He was thin rail man, but I never want to test that how thin and rail he was.
Exactly.
Ever. But also I had the respect for him
Right.
that I wouldn't do that. Social media, TV,
Yeah.
movies, these smartphones, they give our kids a false sense of security, right?
It's funny you say that because I was having a conversation with my daughter and was telling her, and this was a few weeks ago, because, you know, she's complaining before school started, didn't have nothing to do. I said, do you realize that you live in a city where it's everything to do and y'all have nothing to do? I grew up in a country town where there was nothing to do and we always had something to do because we didn't rely on
That's
TV,
right.
video games, cell phones, and stuff like that. We were out having conversations, talking. I mean, think about it. As young boys, we might be sitting out, you don't
On the
play
stoop.
football or whatever. We are sitting out there and playing ball. We sitting out there and might talk for an hour, laughing and joking and clowning.
That's right. That's right.
But that was communication. We learned how to have conversation. They don't know how to have conversation with each other. It's bad when you see kids sitting in a room and they talking to each
Texting.
other and they texting one another, still
Yeah.
talking like we talking. They literally on their phone and like, what'd you say? And they looking at their phone like, you got to be kidding me.
I had two young men coming to the barbershop, right? And they hadn't seen each other since maybe 10th grade. And both of them were out of college.
Wow.
They said, hey, man, it is good to see you. God, man, dapped each other up, whatever. And one of the young men said, hey, let me get your number. He said, well, here's my IG. I scratched my head. How do we get from, let me get your number, I'm going to call you, and we're going to have a conversation, to we just going to text through social
That's
media.
it. That's
We
how
gonna
they
communicate this way. And but that's the vehicle that they're using.
Yeah.
And that's also the vehicle that they're getting their information from. Right?
Yep.
So they're not taking what me and you say as gospel no more, because they got 400,000 followers saying, well, you can say what you want to your parents. They ain't got the right to, tell you
Yeah.
nothing.
That's why and we went by that, but I was going to say that because we were talking about going to therapy, and sometimes going to therapy is better than reaching out to people in your circle or whatever, because sometimes people in your circle ain't in your corner.
Right.
I mean,
And they got the same tools to deal with stuff that you are.
Yeah, right. They ain't bringing nothing profound to
no,
the table.
but they're also telling you that, oh man, I wouldn't take that, and it doesn't even have to be somebody your age. It can be somebody older who's just had a bad experience, and you telling them what you done went through, and as a teenager, you looking at them like they the OG. So they telling me like, man, I wouldn't take that. I would do X, Y, Z. Sometimes you need somebody to take it down and turn the temperature down, like you said, turn that thermostat down a notch and let you cool off, and really give you some real advice or whatever, and tell you stuff that you don't want to hear. Friends, and they gonna always tell you what you want to hear and agree with you.
That part right there is.
And that's how you know you got a real friend. I watched a podcast with Cam Newton a couple of days ago, and he had the guys from the Pivot on there. And that's something they were saying to each other. You got to have somebody in your circle, no matter how things get out of control. You always got to have that person that you cool with that can tell you, Jimmy, you need to chill out, man. Like, you messing up. And you got to be able to take that. So that's got to be somebody you truly.
That's a
really
level of
cool.
respect, too.
Exactly. And everybody's got to have that. You always got to have somebody that can check you and tell you, yo, man, you really tripping right now. You need to stop. And that can calm you down and tell you that. Everybody don't have that. They don't have. Sometimes they got that person that's gaslighting everything up. Instead of calming you down, they gassing you up like, man, go ahead on. And then when you get in trouble.
But I think that's the society that we're in.
That's what I'm talking about.
And
love drama.
And people love to be on social media. I mean, I've seen fights in high school. We got into a couple of little brawls or whatever, but you smashed it and it was done.
By the time school was over, y'all was cool again.
We back cool.
Right back on the bus, beatboxing and
Yeah,
jumping and
exactly.
everything else.
But today, you have such an audience with our kids, and their mentalities and their mental stability is so shaken just by somebody coming on and saying the smallest thing about them on social media.
Yeah.
Because now it's broadcasted out to thousands of people on that thread.
The toughest thing, I think, as a father and growing up, and I've gotten friends that I've made outside, obviously growing up being an adult, but I've got friends that I grew up with that I can pick up the phone right now and we talk like we did at 18.
That's
we
right.
have a straight conversation like we ain't never missed a beat. And having friends like that, I have to tell them sometimes everybody that you hook up with ain't your friend.
That's
They're an acquaintance. They're somebody
Right.
that you can chill with, maybe talk to, whatever. But a friend is somebody that you don't talk to every day. But when y'all talk, it's just like yesterday you talked. You know.
And let me add this too, Jim, because I think part of parents, we've got this village, our peers. But so I was at A&T's career fair today,
Okay.
and so I do a lot of career fairs and stuff like that and mentoring. And so every now and then I take these parenting moments with some of these young students. But at the career fair, there's two young ladies, and so it kind of pivoted because they weren't really doing the work that we do. But I was like, well, let me take a professional development when you started talking about parenting and stuff like that. And it pivoted to where they were enlightening me on some things. And so I think oftentimes, as much as it's great to hear from your peers, sometimes you need to hear from other young adults or kids in your children's group.
Absolutely.
Because, I'm a firm believer that, mentoring goes across, but it's also up and down. And so one of the things they were saying, is that, well, you do a lot of preaching, but do you listen? Kind of like what we're talking about now.
Yeah.
And I had to pause because I was like, man, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like, she was like, y'all's generation, y'all do a lot of talking, a lot of preaching, but y'all never really listen to us. And it's quick to go back in a parent mode and say, well, this is why. And I had to dial it back and literally sit there and use that moment to listen to them
Right.
and just hear them be a voice, say the same things that my kids said
And advocate for themselves.
and advocate for themselves. It was the things they were saying to me is the things that oftentimes Ryan tries to say to me, but because it's a vertical relationship, because I'm the disciplinarian, I'm not giving him the space to say it. So I literally had to take it.
Yep.
It's just what you were just saying about us having somebody else talk to the kids. So you heard it from a whole different perspective because it wasn't your kid telling.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah,
Exactly.
As the
Exactly.
kids hear a whole different perspective. Because when we talking, I mean, we laugh, but all they hear is it's like Charlie Brown's teacher. They hear that's all they hear when we talking to them. But say the exact same thing you said, and it sounds totally different. I've had instances where just trying to tell Kyle something, and he'll come back and tell me, so and so said, and I'm like, I could have swore I just told you that like 2 days ago. I mean, and it ain't even about discipline. It could be just an idea about
Coaching.
something. Yeah, exactly.
Coaching your kid is the same concept. Although we may be really good athletes and can tell other people's kids how to do something in sports, your child is not going to hear you because he's hearing the discipline.
Oh yeah.
He's hearing your tone, your demeanor, even your facial expressions when you say something good, but it could be like this.
Yeah.
And they react to it. And then when they react to it, it turns them off to whatever you're saying. I was in the gym with Darrell one day, trying to teach him how to dunk. Dude can bounce, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he's jumping vertical instead of at an angle to the rim. Told him this for like 4 or 5 times. I was like, "Son, you're going to keep hitting the back of the rim if you do that." Guy walked up to him, whispered in his ear, and said, "Hey, take 3 steps back and jump towards the rim." Same thing I've been telling him. He done with 2 hands like he was, Dominique Wilkins.
Somebody else's idea.
I just had to take it because if I can't allow him to learn from other people the same thing that I want him to get, then that's me being selfish.
I guess at the end of the day, we all want them to grow. It doesn't matter who the teacher is, as
Absolutely.
long as the lessons taught. And so, and my wife gives me balance too, because one of the things she constantly tells me, pick your battles. Because for me, like disrespect.
That's a line that's been drawn for us as men.
Right. But then also, you always say you got to be smarter than a 5th grader. And so we had a situation. Ryan came home late. When you get home, give me them keys. He walks in the house, walks right past me. I'm like, okay. So I'm standing at the top of the stairs, and I'm like, oh. He tries to walk through me.
Oh my.
So that becomes a problem. And so, like I said, it didn't end well For him, I mean, okay, that would sound right, but
He's still with us. Right?
yeah, he's still with
Okay.
us. He's still with us. But the what my wife told me, this goes back to being smart, a fifth grader, what you should have done, because she heard me talk on the phone with him, and she said, when I heard you say that, I knew it wasn't going to go well because you gave him all that time to come home and stew on what he was going to do.
Yep.
What you should have done was when he took his tail to sleep, just go snatch the keys in. When he come down for school, yo, hop in the car, I got you. You ain't got no keys.
Exactly. And
You know, so part of it is because as much as he was on his way home amping up, so was I.
Yeah,
I was getting
you're
ready.
right.
I was ready.
Yeah,
And-
they was
the sweat on.
Hey,
Yeah.
you warmed up.
Pacing,
Push ups,
looking up like, yo, okay, I takes him about 10 minutes. It don't take him but 5 minutes
About
to
8
get
more
here.
minutes to get
Uh-huh.
here. Yeah.
You know, and so to the point, I should have deflated and not allow myself to get amped up by his actions. Now, granted, you know, sometimes you gotta let him know.
There's discipline in the
Right.
house, right?
Yeah.
So another component is, knowing when you're parenting out of anger or frustration.
Right. And that was a frustration moment because there was a lead up to that. It's like, okay, you kind of walking that line, school, the second, third time, you ain't been home when you told you to. And so there was a ramp up. But again, sometimes you gotta let them know you king of the castle, but there's a way to do it.
So-
and that doesn't involve having to patch up walls.
Disclaimer:
Okay.
we are not professionals
Or promoting
or promoting our way of parenting.
right.
Absolutely not.
We're simply stating that there are alternate means and methods of getting your child to understand your point of view.
Right. And that was a teaching point, because again, in retrospect, again, going back to we're supposed to be particularly, and not to take away from having daughters. I got 99 problems raising a daughter, ain't one of them.
a whole
But
different
raising
level.
boys and trying to teach them how to navigate their testosterone and their energy in a world where, one moment of testosterone, they can have two in the back.
Or frustration.
Oh,
Right.
absolutely.
And so in retrospect, I could have easily used that as a moment, handle it another way to where I still got the discipline was still there, the punishment was still there. You ain't driving, I got the keys, and not get it to a point of escalation to where it got out of hand and it could have really damaged our relationship as a father-son.
Yeah.
Because it got to a point of where it could have easily gotten physical.
But that goes to the evolution and pivoting as a parent, right?
True enough.
Like you said, when your kid was 7 years old, we had different problems than we had when they were 14. Than
Oh, absolutely.
When they turned 18. So it's phases to this,
Right.
and there are no books. Let me take that. There are plenty of books that tell you how to do this, but the application of whatever you're learning, it varies, right? I look at a lot of the young men that come through here on a regular basis with their fathers or with their mothers. They don't know how to walk in the door and speak to
That's
the
true.
people in the general vicinity because they've never been taught that. The young men don't hold doors for their mothers. It's especially prevalent in a single family, in a single parent home, but it's also prevalent in with both parents in the house. It's because it's something that as parents, we're still parenting and teaching our kids how to survive versus how to thrive.
So let me ask you, and this is, have you noticed that there's a difference in the southern way we were raised, and then whether it's up north, out west, or further out west, or whatever, it's totally different. Because to your point, I've seen, like growing up in the country or whatever, and my pops was a pastor, so they say we the worst kids, but my mom could literally do this.
Yeah, look.
I swear to God, my mom could put her finger up by her face. We all knew what that meant.
Mm-hmm.
If my dad had to say something, it's really got to a point. It's really on at that
That's
point.
right.
But at the same time, that whole thing you're talking about yes ma'am, no ma'am, opening doors, treating people with respect and stuff, that was just kind of instilled in us. And it wasn't even that forced discipline. You just heard it.
Right.
I heard my mom saying yes ma'am and no ma'am to people, whether they were black or white. I heard my dad. My dad a minister, and he come out the pulpit on Sunday and he's talking to the elder women, yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes sir. These people older than him. It was just that respect factor. So that's what you grew up around. That's what you learned. So it was a learned behavior. I don't know if that's even a learned behavior in households now, because now everything is, and it's always everybody want to be so slang.
With slang.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
you forget. And it's fine. There's a time and place for that. We can talk all the slang in here we want when you're in here in the barbershop cutting hair, but, you got to flip that and turn it off when you're doing business, when there's business in here, and who you can talk slang with and who you can't.
It's a time and place.
Absolutely.
Time and place.
And that's one of the things of teaching my son, his friends, and young people, is that it's a time and place for everything. It's a time for us to show out, and we are natural. Think about it.
The hard part for that, Keith, is we're the only culture that has the code switch like that.
Well, we are, but that's something.
I'm not saying you're wrong.
Right.
In that
No,
statement.
I agree with you, but that's something that we can't change. So, like you said, we've got to be. My daughter said this, and somebody told her, and it's something we've told them before when they were younger. But they're having these conversations. She said they had this conversation just amongst themselves when school first started. As an African American, you got to be twice as good to get half of what they got. So if you know that already, then you got to do that attitude.
It's a mindset now.
Yeah. So even like you said, going back to a young man, Kyle wants to do a business. He wants to be an entrepreneur. Like, you can't be an entrepreneur if you're walking around with a thug image or trying to be hardcore, because you can't go and get money. I've been in banking for 25 years. You come in the bank hardcore, whatever, they're going to look at you. They're going to tell you no before you even sit down.
Nod.
But I'm going to play devil's advocate with you right now, right? Because Kyle's going to go look on social media and see this dude with 1 million likes
Absolutely.
that's getting paid from YouTube, IG, and everywhere else, and say, why not?
Yeah, that's true. And that's the thing. But I told him that you don't know the backstory of that dude that's doing that. If it was easy, I promise you, at 52 years old, if it was easy to just go out and get $1 million, I couldn't even move that car. I'd have so many millions stacked up there. I'm just keeping it real.
That's bad.
It ain't easy. Everybody want to do that, but you can't do it. And those people that's making that $1 million don't never tell you what they had to go through, because they hard now. But they ain't gonna tell you what they had to do. They had to go put a shirt on. They ain't have to put a suit on. You got to put a nice shirt on and something, go present yourself a different way when you're doing business.
That's exactly right.
You don't just go in there. I mean, if you want to start looking at the athletes and all these, these people that's making millions, the Ice Cubes, the Shaqs, and Kobe Bryant, God rest his soul, LeBron James, they got their image, but when they talking business, you see them, they shirt and tie. They are business.
Jay-Z shirt and tie now.
Exactly.
That's
That's a perfect example. Jay-Z went from, and he'll tell you, I went from the hoods in Queens selling on the street to now I'm on Wall Street with the NFL, and think about that.
That's a marvelous transition.
And this brother is literally sitting up with shirt and ties on and designer clothes on there, but he was on the street with the thug look.
Timbs and the jeans.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You don't see
Absolutely.
him doing that no more, because he is a businessman now. So that's what I'm saying. You have to understand that it's a time and place for that. You can have that, do all that when you're hanging out with your friends, but when you're trying to do some business, you got to be about business. You got to look the part. And that's, like you said, everybody was like, I want to be myself. Hey, you want to be yourself, but until you get your own game, you got to play somebody else's.
That's right.
Yeah, and that's something to be said about, yes or no, ma'am, is 100% about humility.
Absolutely.
That's literally all that is. And I tell Ryan all the time, why y'all get so amped up, or, y'all keep coming back telling me to do this. Because sometimes, yes sir, yes ma'am,
Can go
a long ways.
Man, my mom just
Yo,
said
clean
that
your
all the
room.
time.
I'll get to it. Yes ma'am. And
Exactly.
execute. That's like,
That's
dude,
it.
there's nothing I ask, and I was telling him today, nothing I ask you to do takes more than 20 minutes.
That's right.
I mean, I ain't asking you to
That's
cure
right.
cancer or do calculus.
Procrastination, though,
Yeah.
is something that I don't think that's a generational problem. I think that's a team problem.
Nah, it is.
You
Nah,
know,
I agree.
we've all gone through those moments.
I tell you something that, and again, talking to the kids, you know, they don't have any concept of time. None. Like, they literally have no concept of time. I used to get so frustrated. You tell us, get appointment. Kyle, appointment 9:45.
Sleep.
Kyle gets up. We coming from Wake Forest. He want to get up and start getting dressed at 9:30. Like, bruh, it take us more than 15 minutes. I know you think I got a fast car, but we still got to obey the laws. We can't just, I can't get there in 5 minutes.
But you know that comes with responsibility,
Absolutely.
right? So your concept of time is delegated through your responsibilities. If you don't got no responsibility, I don't need to be on time.
And Ryan ain't got no concept of time when it comes to things we need to do, but when that job call,
Yeah.
oh, he there. He own it.
The things they want to do,
Yeah.
they have concept of time. Here's another thing that, I mean, maybe it's just my kids, but kids can't tell time if they ain't got a digital,
Oh, man.
if they ain't got their phone or a digital watch, they can't tell time. So you tell them, look, give them a time and say 5 minutes to 5. What is that? Or say 4:55. What is 4:55?
5.
What is 4:55?
5 minutes either.
they still confused. That's what I'm saying. Kids today have no concept of time because these are all things. They live in such a microwave society now. They ain't learned none of that stuff.
gratification.
Everything is instant. I mean, they don't have to spell. Kids don't have to do anything that we had to do back in the day. I mean, it sounds elementary, but think about it. They don't have to tell time. They don't have to, so they're lazy.
Yeah.
That's the thing, because they don't have to do the stuff that we had to do. We had to come home.
We give them the tools to be lazy.
Well, we do. Obviously, we do, because they all.
He's got cell phones at 5 years old now, 6 years old.
Someone walking around with 2, bro.
Yeah, with tablets and iPads at 3.
Yep.
So, gentlemen, this has been an awesome conversation, and I don't want to cut it off right now, but we're gonna have to. We're gonna have to wrap it on up. But Mr. Keith, Mr. Ryan, I appreciate your time, and I would love for us to do this again. If y'all had, one or two things to leave people with, especially as men raising young men, Ryan, what would you say? Just a quick
It is
synopsis.
okay in a moment of frustration with your kids to take a pause and call one of your boys. And I've done it recently with both of them. And again, my son ain't a bad. He's a teenager, and he does things that will frustrate me as a dad. And reaching out to you guys helps me temper myself sometimes because I'm like, yo, dude, I'm bugging right now. One conversation, Keith was like, because one of my conversations with Keith was, so how do we fix it on the back end?
Right.
Because it's one thing that had the blow up.
Mm-hmm.
What does the next day look like?
What's the repair look like?
And he had to talk me through that because I'm walking around still mad. He walking around like ain't nothing happened.
Yeah.
So it's important to have a village. Like, as grown men, like the women do a great job of getting together. We got to do a better job of getting around other like-minded men and find a place to safely vent and get feedback.
Barbershop Therapy.
I like that.
Mr. Keith, what would you leave us with?
I would say learning to listen and learning to communicate. Not talk to, but literally talk. Not talk at, but talk to. Like that's important. I think communication is key in a relationship, but it's even more important with our boys because they're going to emulate. And you said it earlier. They're going to emulate us. So if we can learn to talk to them and teach them how to have a conversation and conflict resolution, they're going to learn how to do that as they go forward in life. I mean, we're talking 17, 18, 19-year-olds right now.
Right.
So they got a lifetime in front of them, and that's all we can do. We learn to listen and teach them how to listen. Because if you're not hearing, you're hearing things I'm saying, but you're not listening to what I'm saying. So learning to listen and learn to communicate.
Skill sets. Thank you very much. Gentlemen, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you again for tuning in to another episode of Barbershop Therapy. I'm Jimmy Evans, your host, and we cut through the problems. Thank you.